Hi, everybody. I think we are up and running. As you know, my name's Kathy Hanneback. I'm the president of Ideas on Fire and the director of the Rockstar programs. This is an exclusive Rockstar webinar, and it's our first one of the year. So we're still working out some of the kinks on that. I hope all of you got into the event. If not, well, I suppose you can't really see me saying this, but I'll hope you email me if you have any difficulty, or if you're watching the replay video and you had difficulty getting here live, shoot me an email and we can troubleshoot that and figure out what went wrong. But I'm really excited that for our first exclusive Rockstar webinar for the semester, we have Dr. Terry Park with us to talk with us about early dissertation planning. So those early stages when you just passed your quals and you're thinking, crap, now what? So he's going to give us some tips on how to get started. Just a little bit about Terry. Terry is one of the Rockstar coaches. You may have seen him pop in to the Slack communities. He's an Asian American cultural studies professor and scholar, as well as a freelance editor who works primarily with international students. His book project is called Demilitarizing Empire, the Korean War, U.S. Liberal Freedom, and the Korean Diaspora. And it's a really smart book that critically remembers a war that's largely forgotten in the U.S. national imaginary, as well as in studies of U.S. empire. Terry is also the former executive editor of Hyphen magazine and also hosted the web talk show Joy Dunk Club. He's, in addition to these things, if this weren't impressive enough, he's also a playwright and performer of the off-Broadway solo show 38th Parallels, which weaves together storytelling, character monologues, spoken word, and hip-hop to take audiences from his mother's house in Pyongyang to Salt Lake City to the World Cup in Seoul and all the points in between. He received his PhD in cultural studies with a designated emphasis in studies of performance and practice from the University of California, Davis, which is actually where we met, and that we were both in that grad program. And so in his role as a Rockstar coach, he brings his teaching and performance and public scholar skills to bear, helping you Rockstars rock your interdisciplinary careers. So without further ado, I'll turn it over to Terry, and he can help us out on early dissertation planning.
Great. Thank you, Kathy. Thank you for that introduction. It's nice to see or not see everyone for those who will be watching the recording. I see that there are 6 total people in here. So right now, I'm just going to jump to my PowerPoint presentation. Let's see. Starting now. All right. So hopefully you can see the my title page. So again, this is
Terry. That's not up yet.
Oh, it's not. Oh. Let's see again.
Can you hit the screen share button at the bottom of the Crowdcast?
Oh, I'm sorry. Yeah, still learning.
Still working out the kinks, yeah.
The kinks here. Okay. Oh, screen share. Got it. All right. Clicking on screen share. The entire screen. Okay. Now switching over to PowerPoint and playing start. So.
Okay. Go for it.
Great. Awesome. Thank you. So yeah, again, this is a webinar on early dissertation planning. I know that some of you have already started the modules, so some of this may be a little bit redundant. Others may not have started, but overall, I think this will be some helpful advice, largely from my own experience and, to be honest, from my own mistakes that I made along the way. And so, in a way, this is stuff that I wish I had known at the very beginning, but I am very happy to share it with you folks. So let's get started. First of all, congratulations. You have not only finished, I'm assuming, your qualifying exams, as Kathy mentioned, but now you get to write a book, your first book. I'm assuming your first book. Your first academic book, and that's what a dissertation is, right? It's several chapters, and it's your own work. So you're no longer taking classes, you're no longer writing multiple papers for classes that you don't care about. You're finally doing research and writing on what you love. And I think that's a pretty amazing thing. I think there are very few careers and few opportunities where you really get to dive into your academic passions. So I think it's important to start off with some positive things about the dissertation journey, because it is a long and oftentimes stressful journey. But I think it's good to keep in mind what the dissertation can allow us to do. But what does that mean? What does it mean to write a book? That sounds pretty daunting, I think, for a lot of us, for me especially when I first started out. But I think there are a few tips that will help make the beginning of the journey a lot easier than for me when I started. So first of all, there's this comic that I just found today when I was setting up this PowerPoint. And some of you may already be familiar with phdcomics.com. This is one of the, I think, more optimistic cartoons about the dissertation process, and an honest one, right? I think this comic captures perfectly how the dissertation process is a relationship, and a very intimate, fraught, long-term relationship that has a lot of ups and downs. I certainly loved my dissertation at certain points. Other points, I wanted to throw it out the window, or hand it off to someone else, or leave the relationship. But eventually, I I stayed and eventually finished. But I think this is one helpful way to think about the dissertation within the context of a relationship. So, and also a note about these comics and these sorts of memes that talk about the dissertation process. I think they can be helpful for folks to sort of laugh at the entire process, laugh at themselves, which I think is important, especially when we get super immersed in the dissertation process. It makes one feel that that one is not alone in this journey, right? That others also understand the ups and downs of the dissertation process. For others, it may actually not be so helpful. So, in the age of social media and memes and cartoons and such, I think, it's good to keep in mind what sorts of images and articles and different sorts of media will either alleviate one's stress or compound it, right? And that's, it's up to you. But yeah, let's get to the main talking points about the planning the dissertation and thinking about it in the form of a relationship. So here are my 5 elements, and these are mine. They're not others, but my 5 elements for a healthy relationship with your dissertation. And it's not just your dissertation, right? But it radiates outward to yourself, to your friends, to your family, or chosen family, to your comrades, folks that you organize with if you're an activist, or artists if you are an artist, your cats if you have pets or dogs, parakeets, whatever. These are the 5 elements. The first one is to revisit, but don't romanticize your prospectus. I'm assuming that each of you wrote some kind of proposal, depending on your discipline. Mine was about 40 or 50 pages. It included a literature review, an outline of the dissertation as I saw it then. Yeah, for others, in the social sciences and anthropology, perhaps, you might have some stuff on your field work, your ethnography, etc. But, right, you have some sort of prospectus that you are starting off with. You're not starting off with nothing. Secondly, after you revisit your prospectus, is to lay the foundation of the dissertation writing and researching process. So in other words, organization. That's the second part, second element. The third element is pick the one that you need or pick the one that you want. And I'll go into what exactly that means, need versus want. So, which chapter or which section are you going to start the dissertation? Fourth, you've got to commit. Just like any relationship, it takes work, right? And the more you commit, the better. But of course, there are multiple ways, right? Multiple ways to commit to any relationship. There's not just one way. And, it's sort of up to you to figure out your best way to commit. But nonetheless, there needs to be some sort of regular commitment to the dissertation. And then finally, this is a song lyric from, I think, Meghan Trainor. So I've been training for the Boston Marathon, and I downloaded one of those horrible, like 50 top mixes. And this one keeps coming up whenever I shuffle my iPod. So yeah, this is a Meghan Trainor lyric. Hey, you sexy thing standing over there, that's me. So in other words, self-care is an integral part. And I would say threads throughout this entire process, right? It's not just a thing that stands on its own, but it's a foundation for the entire dissertation process. But I'll address it separately. So first, let's go to revisiting, but not romanticizing, your prospectus. So one way to think about your dissertation, no matter if you're in the humanities or in the social sciences, but especially in the humanities, I would say, is that you're telling a story, right? You're not telling this sort of dry, boring thing, but you want to think about your dissertation as a compelling, dramatic story with a certain arc. And of course, you're going to have to figure out how that arc is formed. But yeah, think about the dissertation as a story, not just in terms of structure of it, but in terms of having an audience, right? So you're not just speaking to yourself, you're not just in your head with these amazing ideas, but you're figuring out how to tell it in a way that makes it exciting to hear, right? Whether it's your committee or friends of yours who are going to read your dissertation, maybe, hopefully, or a wider academic audience. For most of you, you're going to probably get the PhD and go on into academia, or not in academia. But in any case, think about this as a book that will go out into the world and make an impact, and that impact will be much more impactful if you frame it as a story. And actually, let me stick there for a second, or stay there. So I would revisit your prospectus, thumb through your description of your dissertation, and think about how to boil it down into, say, like a 1 to 2 page story or a 1 to 2 page abstract. And a lot of you have already written an abstract. But if not, I think it might be helpful to go through your prospectus, and maybe you've taken some time off from your dissertation, maybe things have changed a little bit. So I think it'd be good, right, to sort of condense the entire project into a relatable story that you could tell. And then furthermore, I would boil down that story to a 1 to 2 page, a 1 to 2 sentence argument, which is the next bullet point. So with this idea that you have this exciting story that you want to share with your committee, with your friends and your family, think about how you're going to pitch it, right? Both as a sort of a longer 1 to 2 page story that you might submit to grants to receive funding to research, to do your research for a dissertation, or conferences in which you're going to submit a 1 to 2 page abstract. And then along with that, a 1 to 2 sentence encapsulation of your argument, right? So you're sort of your elevator pitch that, when you go to these conferences and you're networking with other graduate students, professors, senior scholars in your field, you'll be able to condense your entire dissertation in a snazzy, concise, compelling 1 to 2 sentence elevator pitch. And then along with the argument, I think sometimes some folks, and I certainly did, lose sight of the intervention that the argument is making. So at this point, right, you've been a graduate student for however many years, you've been reading a lot of great books, you have professors that you worship, but now is the point where you need to think about your dissertation as not as advancing your field, right? And that's something that foundations, that conferences, senior scholars, they want to see how your argument moves, transforms the boundaries of your field. So really hone in on the intervention that your argument is making. Next, think about your methodology or methodologies, the way in which you are looking at your cultural object, your novel, whatever your primary sources are. And I know for certain folks in the interdisciplinary humanities, methodology is something that is sometimes not discussed or forgotten, but definitely when it comes to, again, applying for grants or talking to senior scholars, they're going to be interested in the kinds of methodologies that you are utilizing. So please keep that in mind. Next, think about your theoretical frameworks that you'll be using. And, so I'll say this about the entire dissertation project. You don't want to be too wedded, right, to really any element of your dissertation. It's going to change, right? It's going to evolve, even though you're not taking courses anymore. You're still going to be interacting with folks, with graduate students, reading, doing research in the field. And so you want to be malleable. And that's definitely the case with your theoretical frameworks. To be honest, I had frameworks when I started the dissertation process, but a lot of them changed. And I would say the frameworks that I ended up using in the final version of my dissertation came in the latter stages. So you want to be flexible, right, with the kinds of frameworks, the methodologies, your argument and intervention, all of these elements that make up your dissertation. And then finally, you want to revisit important primary and secondary sources, the key ones that you know or you think you'll know that you'll be using. So again, right, revisit your prospectus, revisit your the story of your dissertation, revisit your argument, intervention, methodologies, theoretical frameworks, and sources, but don't romanticize them, right? When you wrote your prospectus, it was a moment in time. And again, things often shift, new books get published, conversations will be had with other smart folks. So you want to be open, right? But still have a certain sort of sense of what you want to write about, of course. The second element is now you want to start laying the foundation of this really important relationship that you are embarking on with your dissertation. So in other words, how does one organize the sources, the methodologies, the frameworks, et cetera, that you've now accumulated as a result of your prospectus? Well, you got to pick an organized program, some kind of software that will effectively organize all of this stuff. And Word doesn't count. I know some folks still just use Microsoft Word for writing and for organization. I did at the very beginning, I think. And, some folks are just sort of used to using Microsoft Word or, some other sort of basic word processor. But, there are a lot of great programs out there. I'm sure a lot of you are already familiar with some of them. My favorite is Scrivener. Scrivener, for those who aren't familiar, was initially developed as a software program for screenwriters, and playwrights, but it was found very useful by a lot of academics, and so it's incorporated a lot of features that are specific to academics. And yeah, I would say it was a godsend. To be honest, and I don't work for Scrivener. I'm not being paid to vouch for them, but I would say I would not have finished my dissertation if it weren't for Scrivener. Now, there are other programs that are similar to Scrivener, Evernote, which I'm sure a lot of you are familiar with. And actually, I've noticed that Evernote has adopted some of Scrivener's organizational tools. And it's really good with syncing across different platforms and devices, right? You can have it on your iPhone or your laptop, etc. Scrivener, I'm not quite sure. And I know that it was originally developed for just Apple, but I think there might be a PC version of it now. I'm not sure. Also, Scrivener, there's an educational discount. So I think I paid around $30 for it way back in the day, so it might be cheaper now. I'm not sure, but definitely worth the investment. Evernote is great too. Of course, there's Google Drive, which I'm sure a lot of you use, maybe for your teaching or other purposes. And I would say, you don't have to stick to just one. I think each program has its particular strengths and weaknesses. So if you want to bounce between different platforms, I think that's fine. Personally, I think that would be confusing. And I think, again, that's why Scrivener is great, because it can pretty much do everything. And I will show an example of one of my Scrivener folders in a moment. But actually, yeah, I think it would be helpful to go into my own Scrivener and show how I create folders. So I'm going to switch briefly to one of my Scrivener folders. Hopefully you can see it.
Looks good.
Great, thank you. So this is, it's like going back in time. This is my second chapter. Actually, I don't remember which chapter it was, but it's one of my chapters, The Lonely Frontier. So I wrote my dissertation on the Korean demilitarized zone as a transnational space of US liberal empire. I had 4 chapters. This was the second chapter, which focused on representations of American border guards at the DMZ during the 1950s and 60s for the most part. So if you look on the left, whenever you open a new Scrivener folder, it gives you 2 pre-made binders, one called draft and the other called research. And I think you're not able to delete or add new binders. Actually, I think you can create more binders, but these are the 2 that are given to you. And that's all I used for this particular chapter. So if I click on draft, you will see, all of the drafts that I started off with. And yeah, so and I dated them just so I could sort of track my own progress. I had outlines, and really, if I did this better, I would have created multiple folders. So one for drafts, one for outlines, one for specific sections of the chapter. So for example, I did a close reading of one documentary called Korea and You that featured DMZ border guards. I had a little section on just theoretical frameworks. I had some drafts on just thoughts, various thoughts. So again, you can create different folders to keep track of the different sections of your chapter. And then the second major binder, or I'll close this binder and go to research. So not only is Scrivener a word processor that works just as great as Microsoft Word, but it's also a great researching, organizing tool. So for example, I created a folder of just Saturday Evening Post articles on DMZ border guards. So here I uploaded a newspaper article, which will come up, possibly, maybe not. I might have actually deleted it. But in any case, you can import newspaper articles, pretty much anything on the internet. And the great thing about Scrivener is that it captures a website at the moment that you access it. So in case it disappears for whatever reason, the Trump administration decides that it doesn't like the Saturday Evening Post, you will still have an archival snapshot of the primary source at the time that you accessed it. And let's see. Yeah, I thought I imported it, but I might have deleted the articles. In any case, another great feature is you can write comments here on the right side. So as you're going through a newspaper article, a political cartoon, a website, etc., you can jot down notes here under the comments section, or you can jot them in the main body of the Scrivener page. You can also import articles, journal articles. So again, if you know, say for whatever reason you lose access to certain journal articles, they'll all be here. Yeah. Oh, and you can also import YouTube videos. So for those who look at film, look at video, let's see, Korean War films, Pork Chop Hill. Oh, that's the Wikipedia entry on Pork Chop Hill. Yeah, some of these, I'm not going to go through it, but yeah, some of these contain YouTube videos. And so instead of going to YouTube, you can just play the video in Scrivener and then take notes, do quick close readings as you're watching YouTube in Scrivener. So this is especially great for those who are visual studies folks, but really for anyone in any discipline, I would say Scrivener is really effective. And I should probably get paid by them, since I just gave them the best pitch ever. So that's Scrivener and laying the foundation. But, you know, again, you can use Evernote, Google Drive, whatever. Either way, right, organize your dissertation. Create different folders for your different chapters, and not just your chapters, but different sections, right? You want to break up your dissertation into as many bite-sized pieces as possible. That will alleviate a lot of stress when faced with, you know, the daunting task of writing, say, an entire chapter. And sometimes you won't really know what a chapter looks like. You may think you know, right? But it doesn't really coalesce, I think, until you start the writing process, and it'll be a lot easier if you break it up into different pieces. And I would suggest, and I think I did this, I would suggest just writing on a specific section of your chapter, looking at one primary source, doing one close reading of one documentary and starting there, right? Radiating outwards from that one specific primary source and then seeing the connections between that source and other primary sources, which may actually transform the way that you organize your chapters, right? But then there are others who like to start big, right? They like to have a sort of long view of their dissertation, and they want to start with an entire chapter and then go small. That's fine too, right? Either way, whatever you're most comfortable with. But yeah, you want to have some sort of organizing program with the ability to create folders on sources, chapters, and specific sections. So once you've laid your foundation and you've broken up your dissertation into different folders, then you want to pick the one that you need or pick the one that you want, right? Sticking with this relationship theme. So there are different ways to go about this, and I think they're constrained by both external forces and internal forces. So sometimes you have to start with a specific section, or you have to write about a specific primary source. Maybe you're applying for a certain grant that is just perfect for a specific cultural object that you're looking at. So that would make sense, right, to start with that particular object. Or you're doing field work, right? And you have to, of course, do the field work, and then you want to write about that field work that you did. So there are some external constraints that might direct you to a certain section, a certain object to write about. But if you are not constrained by some of these external constraints, then I would say pick the one that you want to write about. So this touches on the sort of the major lesson of the dissertation writing process, is that it is a marathon, not a sprint. And as cheesy as that sounds, and you've probably heard that before in various iterations, it's true, right? It's a long process for most folks. And so the important thing is you want to sustain as much passion, as much drive as possible. And that's why I would pick, if you are able to, I would pick the section or chapter that just really interests you the most. And that will also help sort of, that'll help you figure out how to write the entire thesis, because, and this is sort of another cliche, but I would say it's definitely true, definitely in the case of my experience, the first chapter is the hardest chapter. You're sort of figuring out how to write. You're figuring out how you like to write, what works for you, which I'll get into in a moment. So that's why it's so important then to start with a topic that doesn't require you to moan and whine. You don't want to write about it. It bores you, right? You don't want to deal with that with the very first chapter when you're figuring out how to write a dissertation, right? So pick the one that you want to write about. And then this is something to keep in mind. And I think there are pros and cons to this particular feature of picking the one that you want. So, for some folks, they see the dissertation as part of their resume, part of their application for getting a tenure-track position, or some other academic position that requires a writing sample and or a job talk. So you might want to think about which chapter that you're most passionate about would also serve as a great job talk. And the chapter that you write first, by the time that you go on the market, will probably be the most polished. And I've heard folks ask, okay, what chapter do I present at a job talk? Do I present the one that I've just written that is fresh, or do I pick the one that's just more polished? And I would say the consensus is you want to go with the one that is the most polished, right? That demonstrates most accurately your abilities as a scholar, right? So you want to go with the one that you spent the most time on, which means the first chapter. And if it's the one that you're the most passionate about, that will come through in your job talk, right? Rather than something that you're not so interested in. But then for others, and actually I had this discussion with my girlfriend, who thought that thinking about going on the market and job talks would be stressful for someone who's just starting the dissertation process. And yeah, I can definitely see that. If that stresses you out, then I don't think about it. It's not worth it. But I think it's something to just keep in mind, right? Sort of the back of your head. But if you pick the chapter that you're most interested in, then I think that'll just sort of naturally become the most polished, the most exciting chapter that could be used in a job talk. Oh, yeah. So that's pick the one that you need, or if you can, pick the one that you want to write about. And again, it could be just a section, not necessarily an entire chapter. Next, the fourth element, you got to commit. It's just like any relationship, right? In some ways, it's even more fraught. It can cause more anxiety, more stress, especially if you're in a relationship, or if you're juggling sort of other work responsibilities, family responsibilities, etc. It's a relationship that requires time, that requires investment, but there are multiple ways to commit, right? Just like there are with any relationship, right? Some people are monogamous, some people are polyamorous. I personally don't understand that, but that there are different ways to enter into a relationship. And either way, however you commit, you want to figure out a good space, right? Or spaces for you to start the dissertation writing process. So whether that's your office or going to a cafe, or actually, so at UC Davis, where I got my PhD, the library lends out like 10 or 15 carols to graduate students, specifically PhD students who are writing their dissertation. Carol is another way of saying a cage. It was basically like a 4x4, 4x6 tiny little cage, like literally like a steel cage that had just a desk, a small desk, a chair, and that's it. And on like the 4th floor of the library, so there's like no one around, super quiet. I rented one for a semester, and it actually helped. But for me, I like to bounce around. I can't stay in one place to write. So I'll go to a cafe, then go to another cafe, and then come home maybe. So if you're that type of person, that's great. But yeah, you want to figure out what sorts of spaces are most conducive to writing. And for some folks, it's distracting to be in a cafe. It's distracting to write with someone else. They just want to be by themselves, and that's fine, right? That's whatever works for you. What's next? Accountability. Yeah. So the fact that you are listening to this right now or watching this means that you've already entered a system of accountability, right? You've signed up for the dissertation writing bootcamp with Ideas on Fire. It's providing you a set of structures, right, to make you accountable, whether it's through the coaches such as myself or Kathy, other bootcamp participants, right? So, accountability can sound a little, I don't know, policing, but I think, think about it as ways to make you feel less lonely in the writing process, knowing that there are others who have either gone through the experience, like the coaches, or who are currently going through the same experience. And, you can find your own writing groups offline too, right? It's sort of cultivating the right arrangement of different spaces, different forms of accountability. Along with that, some folks say you got to write every day. Actually, a lot of people say that, and I would say yes. If you can figure out a way to commit to, 15 minutes, 30 minutes, there's the famous 15 minutes a day book. Other folks suggest 30 minutes. There are different computer programs, software programs, online programs that sort of force you to write for, a set time. They kind of give you an alarm. I actually used that, and it was effective for a certain amount of time. Whether it's every day or 3 days a week, because you have all of these other tasks, you're a teaching assistant, you are adjuncting, you want to have some kind of regular writing schedule, and you want to commit to it. And, that can be hard, right? I think it can sometimes bring up certain sort of emotional stuff. So, I mean, to be honest, I first started seeing a therapist during, during the dissertation writing process. And my therapist, she had a PhD, so she had gone through the dissertation process herself. So she actually became sort of a coach, a writing coach. And, you know, at first she suggested doing the daily writing thing, and I would try it. And, you know, I would stick with it for a couple of weeks or 3 weeks and then sort of fall off the wagon and then feel guilty. And then that guilt would compound itself and completely interrupt the writing process. So then in talking through this with my therapist, she said, well, if you're the kind of person that just can't quite write every day, you know, whether it's because you are busy being a teaching assistant and or other things, then maybe you're just the kind of person that kind of goes with the flow, who writes in different spurts, right? Maybe you can't write every single morning, but you can write, you know, one day you write in the morning, the next day you write in the evening, right? Finding little snatches of time throughout the day, and maybe not every day, but like 3 days a week, 4 days a week. And that actually dramatically improved my writing process. When I sort of accepted my own internal flow and sort of and other external constraints, that's when my writing really began to peak. So that's why I say that you got to commit, right? But there are multiple ways to commit, and you know, it's up to you to figure out what works best for you. I don't think there's one solution, right? And then just sort of stay in that flow as much as you can. Sounds kind of Zen, and I'm not Zen at all. But right, it's staying in that sort of organizational work flow, writing flow, as much as possible. And then along with flow, actually, that's a nice segue into the next and last element. Going back to the Meghan Trainor quote, "Hey, you sexy thing standing over there, that's me." Self-care, right? This is such an integral part of the mission of Ideas on Fire that trickles through throughout all of the services, all of the products, the programs. Is right. We're not these isolated, sort of bounded individuals who, I mean, I think graduate school sort of cultivates that sort of existence, and especially that's the case in the dissertation writing process. It can be very isolating, very lonely, especially if, you know, you're not in the university where you're getting your PhD. Maybe you're living somewhere else for whatever reason. Either way, I think it's crucial to cultivate some kind of self-care practice that works for you, so you can maintain that writing flow. And it starts with the body, right? And you know, this is something that I appreciate from Kathy, sort of her scholarly and sort of emotional attention to the body, right? We're not just brains. I think this is how Kathy put it before. We're not just these brains walking around, right? We're bodies. We have needs, we have wants, we got to eat, we got to sleep 7-8 hours a day. We got to breathe. We got to remind ourselves, right, that we need to take care of ourselves, because if we don't, then it's going to be a painful process in writing the dissertation. So whether it's doing yoga, which I sort of did off and on during the dissertation writing process. I actually ran a lot. I did several half marathons during the writing process, and that was helpful because they were sort of kind of mini dissertations, right? You have to run for a long distance, and you got to pace yourself accordingly. So whatever it is, yoga, knitting, whether it's by yourself or with others, you know, something that attends to the body, because that's exactly what gets forgotten and erased during the dissertation writing process. And then you want to have a good relationship with your committee, of course. This, I believe, is the focus of the next webinar. But, I would say that the more that you take care of yourself, the more that you're grounded in your body, the more that you're present with loved ones in your life, then the better your relationships will be with your committee and your advisor. The communication will improve. And I'm sure that'll be expanded upon in the next webinar, but I just want to mention, right, that I think that your relationship with your committee, and especially your advisor, is so important in your future career, whether it's in academia or not. And right, practicing self-care will help improve that relationship. And then, of course, it'll help improve your relationship with the people in your community, whoever that is, right? And I know that a lot of folks who are Ideas on Fire participants tend to be activist-minded or artistically minded, right? So that was the case for me. I did a lot of organizing, as Kathy alluded to in her intro. During the writing process, I started to rediscover my artistic passions, and that's what fueled me, right? I still met with writing groups. I still maintained great friendships and relationships with colleagues in my department, but I could not have survived the dissertation writing process if it weren't for the artists, the activists, people who had nothing to do with academia, but were super supportive, in some ways too supportive because I would get distracted a little bit, but that was fine. But those were the folks who really pushed me forward because they knew that I was writing the dissertation. And so, even if they couldn't quite understand what I was writing about, they were attentive, they were curious, and it was actually very helpful to practice my elevator speech with folks, not in my department, but folks who were not in academia. So being embedded in the community serves multiple purposes, right? I think it reminds you to stay in your body. It reminds you that you're not sort of alone or isolated, that you and your knowledge that you're producing in your dissertation is part of a wider community. So those are the three elements of self-care, which something that I truly believe in and has sustained me now as a lecturer at Harvard. And this is what all of those five elements led me to with my family. And if I can do it, as someone who struggled with the writing process, who juggled a lot of different passions and obligations. If I can do that, you can do it. So good luck with starting the dissertation. It's a rewarding journey, and I would not have traded it for anything in the world. Thank you.
Okay, and so let's put our videos back up. Aha, okay. So do folks have questions about anything that Terry was talking about? You can post them in the chat on the right-hand side. Sid says, that was great, thanks.
Thanks, Sid. And I can see the chat.
Okay, cool. So do you have a question in particular, or are you getting started on any one of these particular stages?
Import PDFs like from, yes. Scrivener can import PDFs, JPEGs, I think, a lot of different file formats. And, the great thing about Scrivener is they keep improving it. I think I have an older version, actually, and, the newer versions might be able to do more, but definitely PDFs, yes. And then you can write, little notes on the side, on the right-hand side, which is great with Scrivener.
A very similar program to Scrivener is DevonThink, which used to be Mac only. I don't know if they've changed that by now. I know Scrivener is cross-platform now, but I'm not quite sure about DevonThink. But DevonThink works very similar. It's a bit more powerful, so it handles large and more diverse types of archival materials, so different kind of files, so video, audio, PDF, images, text, that kind of stuff. And actually, I can track down a URL for that.
Yeah, I think I remember hearing about it when I was weighing what organizational tool to use. Yeah, I don't think Scrivener, at least when I used it, could contain audio files. So
yeah. And DevonThink is still Mac only. So if you're not on a Mac, it's useless to you. But but if you are on a Mac, it can be really helpful. I used it for part of my dissertation and found it really useful.
Oh, cool. And so now Scrivener is now available for PCs?
I'm pretty sure, yeah.
Oh, cool. Sid, yes, it does. Yeah, it does have a citation manager. You can do footnotes, endnotes, all of that. When you export it to Word, it can look a little funky. Those actually gotten better, the importing capabilities. So you might have to, fiddle with it, but yeah.
Does it format your citations though?
It does, but it doesn't look quite as, it's not this, it doesn't look the same as it appears in Scrivener. Yeah, but so it appears at the bottom where it should be. Yeah. Oh, like automatically format?
Yeah, like can it switch it from Chicago to APA to MLA?
I'm not sure.
Okay.
Yeah, that's a good question.
Zotero is a really good resource for that if you're looking for a citation manager. I mean, there are a bunch of them. Like there's EndNote, which is like the old school one that's still around and it's not actually old school, but it has been around longer than most of them. Mendeley, what's the other one I can't think of? Zotero is the biggie though. It's free, it's open source. It was developed by academics on a university campus. I forget what school. I think it's in Georgia. I want to say Georgia somewhere. But it was developed by academics for academics, and it's pretty awesome.
Is it free?
Yeah.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, that's what I use.
Okay, I should be using that too. Keep hearing about it here at Harvard. Everyone loves it here.
It's free. I'm pretty sure it's open source. There's an online version, so you can do it in your browser, but there's also a desktop version, so you can download it if you want offline access.
Oh, nice.
And it's a full citation manager. So it will convert your citations from whatever format to whatever format in the push of a button. It's amazing.
Wow.
Yeah.
Okay. I'm definitely downloading it. Yeah. Oh, the differences between methodology and theoretical frameworks. Kathy, do you want to?
Yeah. So this is going to depend strongly on your field, right? And you should certainly defer to the people in your field for what they mean by these terms and how your field or fields, since most of you are writing interdisciplinary dissertations, as both Terry and I did as well, different fields define these terms in different ways. But generally, you can think of your methodology as how you study something. So we talk a lot in cultural studies about your archive. So your archive is your actual objects that you're making claims about. It's not the bigger picture stuff. It's literally the things that you gathered from the world that you're making claims about. It's the movies, it's the songs, it's the websites, it's the journal articles, it's the novels, it's the activist pamphlets, it's the pieces of legislation, it's the actual objects that you're working with, that you're drawing conclusions about, right? Those are your archival objects. Your methodology is what you do with them, how you look at them, how you actually engage with them. So for instance, if you're an anthropologist, you're probably using some combination of ethnography and participant observation as part of your methodology. There's going to be exceptions. Not all anthropologists use those these days, people who are doing more kind of creative versions, but most anthropologists use those two methodologies in some form or another, right? So you can think about what an ethnography or participant observation is, right? You are engaging with human beings. You are talking to people. In the humanities, we don't talk to people very much as part of our methodology, right? We study texts. what texts mean has expanded dramatically over the last several decades. But in general, we don't talk to many people as part of our methodology, right? Social scientists talk to people. That's how they study stuff, right? They do interviews, they hang out with them, they observe those participants and how they interact with each other. They draw conclusions based on that. In ethnography, you physically remove yourself from the place you normally exist in and you go to live in another place, right, for a set period of time. That might mean physically moving somewhere, that might be hanging out in chat rooms if you're doing a virtual ethnography. The details might differ, right? But it's how you engage with those objects. In the case of an ethnography, those objects are humans, right? They're human beings. And I don't mean for that to sound dehumanizing in that way. But your archive is comprised of human beings and the things that they tell you, right? The stories that they share, the narratives that they convey. Your theoretical framework is how you understand what you do with your objects. So theoretical framework is probably what most graduate students are most well-versed in. Methodology, not so much. You get a lot less training in methodology in graduate school than you get in theoretical frameworks. Theoretical frameworks are all of those amazing texts and scholars and books and essays and articles that you read that other people have written about whatever it is that they're studying, right? Your theoretical framework could be Foucauldian, it could be Derridian, it could be Butlerian, it could be Anzalduian, if that is the correct way you say that. It could be, it's probably going to be a combination of a bunch of people, right? So your theory is the kind of the big picture. Tools is not really the right word because that's usually what we talk about when we talk about methodology. But it is a theory. Your theory box is a toolbox, right? It's a set of tools that shapes how you interpret the methodology you use to engage with your objects.
So
did that make it worse? Is that more confusing?
Oh,
okay.
No. Well, I'm just curious, Kathy. So for your dissertation, what was your methodology?
Oh, God.
Or what were your frameworks?
It was complicated. So my dissertation, which to tell you the truth, I don't remember the title of, Queer Tactilities, Corporeal Ethics and Visual Culture. Yes, it's been a long time. And the book I wrote afterwards was a totally different project. So that's part of why it's even farther away from me. But yeah, so I did kind of a combination, methodologically, a combination of discourse analysis, a few interviews, which were new for me, and I had to learn how to do for the first time, some textual analysis, and I think there's historiography in there somewhere, and visual analysis as well, because I did some visual, it was about visual culture. So theoretically, it was grounded in queer of color critique and transnational feminism. So as you can see, like those terms, right, queer of color critique and transnational feminism, those aren't methodologies necessarily, right? They're connected to certain methodologies, but they don't dictate a particular methodology. You can use queer of color critique to do an ethnography. You can use it to do a textual analysis. You can use it to do a historiography. You can use it to do a biology experiment if you want. I don't personally know how you do that, but I'm sure it's possible. Some STS person would be the person to ask how to do that. So your theory is like how you interpret the way that you engage with your archival objects.
I think that was super helpful for Catherine, for me, I'm sure for other folks, because yeah, like you said, methodology tends to be muted in interdisciplinary humanities programs. I know it was for me when I went through cultural studies, but yeah, it's an important thing to think about when starting the dissertation writing process. And then, oh, wow, not even once.
Catherine, remind me of your field again? I want to say cultural studies, right? Is that right? Cultural studies, yeah. That's what I thought. I mean, there are probably program-specific reasons for that, but field-specific reasons would include the fact that cultural studies scholars use all kinds of different methodologies. When we use the term interdisciplinary or interdisciplinarity, we're talking about methodology. It often gets reduced to theory, right? So I use these scholars to talk about whatever it is I study, or I study these kinds of things, right? Which is how traditional disciplines are organized. But disciplines largely are organized by methodology. So anthropologists study whatever in this shared way or set of ways, right? Literary scholars study literature, broadly conceived, in this particular way. Another person from another field could study that same object, literature, using a completely different methodology, right? So an anthropologist could study literature using ethnography by, for instance, interviewing the author and the publisher and the marketers and the audiences, right? But cultural studies and women's studies and ethnic studies, these are fields that are not designed around a shared methodology. They're designed around a shared kind of theoretical approach to whatever questions and objects and methodologies you're using, which is great, but it's also frustrating because it means that everyone isn't sharing the same approach, right? Yeah, so you say like, we have methods, but we don't really call them methods. And that was certainly my experience as well, which is annoying, but common.
And lead to a lot of confusion.
Yeah.
Justifiable confusion, yeah. Oh, and quickly, something that you mentioned or sort of implied earlier. So one thing that is often said, and was definitely said to me over and over, and I'm sure it was said to you, Kathy, over and over, is that the dissertation is a work in progress. It's a rough draft. The best dissertation is a done dissertation, which when you're in the thick of it can be really frustrating to hear. At least it was for me, because I just got the sense that, oh, you just want me to turn in anything? Really? No, that can't. I just spent 5, 6, 7 years to produce this thing, this polished thing. I don't want to send in crap, but in other ways, it did alleviate my stress, especially towards the end. So maybe this isn't so much the case for starting the dissertation, but I think it might be helpful to keep in mind that it's not perfect. It can't be perfect, and like Kathy alluded to, it's going to change. Yeah. So I don't know anyone whose book is exactly the same as the dissertation that they wrote.
It can't be. No one would publish that. They certainly not because it's bad, just because it's not a book. Dissertations are not books.
It's not. No. Yeah. I mean, it's sort of written with a book in mind in the future, right? But
it's more of an exercise. Like that approach is more of an exercise than what will actually be a book manuscript someday.
Yeah. Yeah, I don't know. I've never heard of anyone saying, "Oh yeah, I met a publisher and they."
They don't do that. Publishers these days, there are urban legends about back in the day, whenever that day happened to be, which may or may not have existed in reality, when publishers would publish unrevised dissertations. I'm not convinced that it was ever true. But it sure as hell is not true now. No publisher will even look at or read a unrevised dissertation. And that's okay. A dissertation is not supposed to be a book. It doesn't have to be a book, which should also alleviate some of the pressure that students often have about, I'm writing a book, it has to be as good as, Jasper Puar's latest monograph. Like, no, it doesn't.
No.
If you read her dissertation, it doesn't sound like her latest monograph. It shouldn't. The whole point of being a scholar is you get better. Mm-hmm. You get better over time. You get smarter. You understand your writing habits better. You hone those writing habits better. You hone your thought processes. You learn something. Otherwise, you're doing it wrong. Your dissertation should change over the course of writing it because you're learning.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Okay, are there any, we ran a little bit over time, but are there any lingering questions? We're happy to hang out for a couple minutes.
Looks like
Okay.
that's it.
Well, so our next webinar is actually coming up on Monday, so coming up shortly. We had to reschedule this one to kind of on late notice, so we apologize for that. But that was to support and respect the general strike on the 17th. So our next webinar is this coming Monday, the 27th, I believe, February 27th. And that is on crafting a book proposal. So I realized that we just started with how to start on your dissertation, and the next webinar is how to write that book proposal. So if you're like nowhere near that point and that would just freak you out, by all means, don't come. But you could always register anyway, and then you can watch the replay video like 4 years from now when you're at a point where that would make any sense. Also, feel free to spread the word to anyone you know who is at the stage of writing a book proposal. I know some folks who registered for this one are a little further on in the dissertation process, which is actually great. So you're kind of revisiting your structure and seeing how it's going and reevaluating and seeing if you need to change anything. So for those of you, you might be looking towards a book proposal down the line. So it would still be useful for you, even if you're not ready to send off a proposal right this second. So that's Monday. You can register on our website, ideasonfire.net/webinars. The link is on there. You register just like you did for this one. That webinar is public, so tell anyone and everyone you know they're welcome to attend. I do want to say the upcoming one that Terry mentioned about working with advisors, that isn't until March 21st. So it's
whoops, sorry.
Yeah, but that's okay. But it is coming up. So next month, and that's a Rockstar exclusive one. And we'll be talking about how to identify good advisors, how to be a good advisee, and how to get the most out of that kind of mentoring relationship. Oh. So thank you all so much for being here. And have a great weekend.
Yeah. Thanks, everyone. Thanks, Kathy.